Hi everyone, my name is Roxy and I'm the Visitor Experience and Outreach Coordinator at the Lewis Latimer House Museum. For those who cannot see me, I'm an East Asian woman with shoulder length hair, and I'm wearing a blue shirt today. I'm joined tonight by our esteemed panelists from the museum and friends of Abolitionist Place. Tonight, we're here for the first talk in the Black Historic Sites and Conversation series presented by the Lewis Latimer House Museum. Black Historic Sites and Conversation is a series of virtual talks in collaboration with different Black heritage sites and cultural centers in the greater New York City area about the ongoing work of preserving, interpreting, and celebrating Black history and historical figures. Tonight's program is supported by the Mellon Foundation. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge we are on the land of the Lenape people. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hopes of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We are on the ancestral lands of Lenape people. We pay respects to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that brings us together here tonight. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Here are a few links that I'll share in the chat for more information about the Lenape people. I would also like to take a minute to introduce our museum. The Lewis Latimer House Museum, as you can see behind me, was the home to Black inventor Lewis Latimer, who lived in Flushing, Queens from 1903 to 1928. He contributed to modern technologies, including the early elevator system, bathrooms and railroad carts, the telephone, and most notably, the carbon filament light bulb. After this introduction, we'll hear a presentation by friends of Abolitionist Place, followed by a conversation between the panelists and a Q&A session. If you have any questions that you would like the panelists to answer, please feel free to share them through the Q&A function. We will likely be able to get to 8 to 10 questions depending on the time. There is also an option to upvote any questions you see in the Q&A feature, should you see your question in the list. Please also feel free to comment, share your thoughts in the chat as the presentation goes. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to our panelists to introduce themselves.
Thanks so much, Roxy. I'll just introduce myself briefly. Hi, everyone. I'm Yuan Yan, the Executive Director of the Lewis Latimer House Museum. I've been working at the museum in different capacities since 2014-15, and I became the director in 2017, and it's been an amazing journey of building up a grassroots organization, kind of acting as a temporary steward of this incredible legacy of the Black inventor, and working with dedicated community members and board who have been supporting the museum for decades. And I'm really excited about this series, mostly for this conversation today with the Abolitionist Place. I myself, I'm really thrilled to learn more about the history and also the story of this place, and you all some amazing work. So with that, I'll pass it on to our friends at the Abolitionist Place.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. My name is Shawné Lee. I am the daughter of William Curtis Lee and Joy Monroe Lee Kafega Chatel, also known as Mama Joy. I am co-founder of Friends of Abolitionist Place, as well as co-founder for Team SEALs, which is a cultural heritage dance and drumming organization that my son and I have founded, and we're in schools teaching traditional drum and dance. So that is how we express ourselves through our culture, and also teaching the children about their culture and uplifting them through the world of dance and drumming.
Thank you. Well, you're muted.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I know I was muted. Hi, my name is Raoul Rothblatt. I have been fighting along the side of Shawnè for nearly 20 years, and I was very much inspired by her mom, Mama Joy, and I remain inspired by her. And so I'm very glad to be in this this group of people here tonight. You know, we have been fighting this for all of these years, and it's been kind of a lonely fight. And tonight it seems like a much bigger fight. I'm really excited to have so many people joining us tonight, including the Latimer House. Has been awesome. So I do a lot of things. I'm a musician. We have a lot of musical connections with Shawnè. I play West African music. Right now I'm the Director of Constituent Affairs for Assembly Member Brian Cunningham with the 43rd Assembly District. And today's my dad's 99th birthday, which is shocking to me. But I'm wearing this blue shirt, which was actually once his, in honor of that. So so thank you all for being here, and we love to stay in touch. And you know, you're always open to continue the conversation. Aaliyah, you're next.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Aaliyah Baki Vaughn, and I have been serving as the executive director for the Circle for Justice Innovations for many years. That's an organization that does participatory grant making to support grassroots organizations that are working to dismantle the criminal legal system and to replace it with one that is more restorative. I've been involved in this initiative in its second, I guess, or third iteration, because one day I was walking down the street on my way to work and I saw a photo of Harriet Tubman in the window of this very old building, and I decided to investigate. And when I looked, I could see that it was indicative of the house that I saw at 227 Duffield, really Abolitionist Way, had been a historical site in that it had been a place on the Underground Railroad. And as I kept walking every day, I made it a habit to stop at that building. And then I saw that there was some sort of stuff in front of it that indicated that they might be demolishing it, which really got me upset. And so I reached out to a number of folks and made my way indirectly to Shawnè, Sister Shawnè, and to Raoul, and to Imani, who was the head of Equality for Flatbush, and then to many others, to Justin and to Olenka. And basically we started a movement to organize to keep that house alive and to remember the history that had gone into it, and also the sacrifices that Mama Joy had made to keep the house, because she had been involved in a case against the city of eminent domain. But I'm going to let y'all learn more about that later. And I'm going to pass it on to Justin if we're going to do it in age, because Olenka's the
Hi guys, my name is Justin Cohen. Really excited to be here, and thanks again to the Latimer House. I am an author, an activist. I have been working on a campaign, the No New Jails campaign here in the city, to prevent the construction of new jails in the boroughs, which I continue to view as unnecessary, a giant waste of money, and a way of propagating an immoral system. And my friend Imani, who I was organizing with, told me I needed to come to meet all the folks that he was organizing with who are trying to save this house. And I have been in love with everyone in this room and with this project ever since. And it is an absolute joy. And it is so deeply rooted in so many different histories and so many different struggles. And it really connects the past and present in ways that are surprising and beautiful and make all of us proud, I think. So I'm just grateful to be here, and I will throw to my friend Olenka.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm Trisha Olenka Ben Davies. I've been with Friends Abolitionist Place since 2019. that time, when we heard about the house and really started to mobilize to get it landmarked, I helped to co-found an organization called Flatbush Mixtape. We're a grassroots mutual aid organization. We help to do things like food access, resource redistribution, relationship building, storytelling, all those things. And what else? I'm a first generation daughter of African immigrants. My parents are from Sierra Leone, and the town where we're from, Freetown, was actually founded by returned enslaved Africans. So I bring that DNA with me, just always wondering, I know that my people have gone on this transatlantic journey, and when I heard about the house, I'm always thinking well, why New York, God? Out of all the cities I could live, quality of life is much better, in other places. I grew up in North Carolina. And when I think about, why God has sent me here, I think about how I've got, wrapped up into this movement as well. And so I'm just really pleased and excited to see where this work leads us. Thank you. Pass it back to you, Roxy.
Actually, I think I'll pass it to Raul to tell folks more about the work that you all do, and maybe an overview of the history of the Abolitionist Place itself.
All right. So should I go ahead and do the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, please.
Or can I suggest we show the video of Mom so we could introduce her?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I like that idea. You can take care of that, Roxy?
Yes, 1 second.
So we're about to see footage of my mom. This is one of my favorite videos of her because she basically is explaining who she is and the work she was diligently fighting for.
Maybe while Roxy's looking, so this story, oh, here we go. Never mind.
New York was the second largest slave owning state in the nation, the second largest. South Carolina was the first. I thought once you came north, you were free, but we were not free. And there's no museums. My name is Joy Maria Chatel. I live at 227 Duffield Street. I'm part of the Duffield Street 7, which is the Underground Railroad.
We found the tunnels, we took them downstairs, and we showed them the entrance to the tunnels from a house, 223 Duffield Street.
I'm an elder at the Prospect Park African Drummers and Dancers Association. And one of the elders came over here to this place, and he said to me, "Sister, do you know where you are?" And I looked at him, I think so. I'm in my house. And he says, "No, you're on holy ground. Our people went through here. This is part of the Underground Railroad."
Before 1840, it was just the American Anti-Slavery Society that was run by Garrison. By 1840, Lewis Tappan, who was a Brooklynite, split with Garrison, and he organized the American and Foreign Anti-Slavery Society. Tappan is helped by Henry Ward Beecher, the founding of Plymouth Church. That part gets into the literature. The other part does not.
My husband told me about the Underground Railroad. He told me about his late wife's family and what he was told about the people that lived here. He says, yeah, there's a room downstairs, and there was an opening between all the buildings.
There's been a lot of back and forth about whether there were connections between these houses underground. The 1855 Paris map clearly shows that there were such connections.
Henry C. Bowen, who was Tappan's son-in-law, founded what's now called Bridge Street Church. We now know that there are tunnels and passageways in that church. What is that relationship between Bridge Street Church and Duffield Street? Well, it's only a block away.
Harriet Lee Truesdale was a fighting woman.
Every abolitionist lived in fear.
Harriet Truesdell, the owner of this house, and her friend Julia Tappan were both delegates to the American Women's Anti-Slavery Convention, the National Convention in Philadelphia in 1838.
She was the treasurer. Then she became the secretary. The woman almost lost her life in Pennsylvania at a convention for abolition and for the women's abolitionist movement. They burnt that building down and that woman was in there, Harriet Lee Truesdale.
I would not know about this house if people in the African-American community had not had an oral tradition and got up and yelled about it. I wouldn't know that Harriet Truesdell lived here.
Blacks aren't entitled to a museum. We're not entitled to anything to commemorate such a horrible thing that happened to us. We can't have anything, especially when the city knows that the abolitionists lived here.
It's not an issue of Black history. This is an issue of American history. And that all of us should raise our voices, preserve our history, preserve our legacy, and by all means, give honor and due respect and regard to those people who gave their own lives in order to save others.
For some reason, Underground Railroad, Oregon Freedom Trail information has been omitted.
There's a need for African Americans to be able to have a monument to this terrible time in their history.
I would see having institutions of learning that could teach everybody about it.
I don't understand why we can't have a little piece of history when everybody else has so much. We need to keep our legacy alive. Yeah.
All right. So it's just so great to see Mama Joy over there. And, you know, a bunch of these people who were in that video are now in national news. That was Letitia James, who used to be the city council member, and now she's the New York Attorney General, who's been getting in a lot of news. Behind her was standing our former, well, depending on what district, he's still a current congressional representative, Hakeem Jeffries, who's now the head of the Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives. So, you know, it's crazy that we had all of that stuff and we're, in a sense, still fighting. So let me go in and give, I'm going to try to be as fast as possible with an overview of the history here. Give me a second. Share screen. Okay. All right. So here is Mama Joy oh, hold on a sec. Can people see the screen or see me?
Yes.
All right, good. Okay, so here is Mama Joy at one of our parties in 227 Duffield. Bit of history. 1790 in Brooklyn was 1/3 enslaved. So it had one of the highest levels of enslavement in the country. Jumping ahead, slavery ended in New York in 1827. 1848 is, you know, people mostly think about the beginning of the women's suffrage movement. It actually started earlier than that and included Harriet Lee Truesdale, who moved to 227 Duffield, who was one of the founders of the women. So the abolitionist movement didn't include women. Harriet Truesdale, a resident of 227 Duffield, was a member of the women's abolitionists. And at this point, still, New York City was the financial capital of the Southern slave system. And hold on a second, why is this not bad? Fernando Wood, jumping a little ahead a little bit, this was a history that lasted for hundreds of years, really. So in 1861, instead of supporting the North, the mayor of New York wanted to secede to be part, because the financial connections to the South were more important than being part of the United States of America. So Fernando Wood wanted to secede from the United States, so New York City and Brooklyn and Queens as well, would be part of a trading partner with the South. So the 2003, so Mayor Bloomberg wanted to confiscate and demolish Mama Joy's home. So she mentioned at one point the Duffield 7. It's now the Duffield 1. So all the other houses in the area have been demolished either by New York City or by the pressures, the conditions that the New York City made at that time. So we have a street called Abolitionist Place. It was renamed Abolitionist Place. There's only one building from that period, from that time, and that's 227 Abolitionist Place, our building. Ironically enough, in the process of New York City trying to demolish the history, we discovered a lot of the history, and the city wanted to spend a lot of money on this report to try to undermine our argument, and they hired these historians to kind of back them up, and a lot of them were amazing. This was one of the amazing academics, and who said that Duffield Street is the most promising site for Underground Railroad research in the country. Partially, we had the physical evidence. We had all these Black churches around there. We had the abolitionists, white and Black, and the oral history, which is quite unique in our location. And so it took until 2007. New York City fought City Hall and won. So we had this group called Fury, one of these radical groups, tried to be all scary with a name like Fury, but they were amazing. They're still around, but not quite as active as they used to be. And so we won this eminent domain fight. So because of that, New York City promised $2 million to commemorate 19th century Brooklyn abolitionist history, which nobody really knew about at that point. And in 2014, also Mama Joy passed away. So we could talk a lot about that as well. She suffered a lot with all of this construction around her. They built one of the smaller buildings in the neighborhood, is a 14-story hotel, like right on the property lines. This is a neighborhood now with a 93-story building going up. So if you think of downtown Brooklyn as kind of a scrappy little neighborhood, it's now incredibly dense, incredibly high-rise buildings. One of the this area has one of the highest densities of population in the United States, and it all happened because of this plan that was rezoning back then. So the city did the first $1 million they spent, they did this amazing exhibition called In Pursuit of Freedom, and I hope we'll share this link because it had this map of the area. It had tons of educational resources. Really did a great job explaining the history. I think it also points to how much more we have left to learn, but that $1 million very well spent by New York City. And one of these maps, every couple of months, somebody shares this map, but this was part of this exhibit, and it has a list of the slaveholding names in Brooklyn. And if you know Brooklyn, a lot of these names are very familiar. Remsen, Sand Street, Van Brunt, Cortelyou, there's all sorts of Lefferts. All of these names on this list are slave-owning names, and we honor their history every day. We have Bergen Street, we have all of these streets honoring these people. We don't really have a history to recognize the people who resisted these slave owners. So we retell the story. I also like to say that we have New York City is this fantastically rich city. So we don't have a lot of Confederate flags flying here, but we don't need to. We have the legacy of that tradition, the incredible wealth that New York City got to have through the slave trade. And so these high-rise buildings are really a memorial to how connected we were to the Southern slave system. Hold on a second. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's see here. Okay. So the first $1 million got spent on this amazing exhibit. All the other buildings have been demolished there. The city still has another $1 million that it promised, signed a legal contract to build another monument, to build something to honor this history. So in comes an idea to build a monument to the Black suffragists. So abolitionist suffragists, not exactly the same thing, but you know, these are just words. Underground Railroad is just a network of of people fighting for liberation. The suffragists were really kind of the same. Brooklyn was home to the first Black suffragist club. And one thing that we discovered even more recently was that Ida B. Wells, quite famous, lived half a block from this little park. So along with some other folks, this Girl Scout troop started a petition to build a monument to these 5 Black suffragists who were so important. And we got a lot of support for it. So here are a picture of these. These are these, we have a lovely artist who has done portraits to all these women. Ida B. Wells is probably the most famous on the right, but all of these women really deserve to be recognized. They really started the Black women's club movement. They started a lot of the sororities, you know, the NAACP, all of that started a little bit before all of those institutions started. There were these women's founding the institutions that we know as the NAACP, the Black fraternities and sororities. A lot of these national Black clubs were really founded, you know, before the Niagara movement, which people here I suspect might know about. There were these women, and they were all in downtown Brooklyn, a little bit Manhattan too. I don't want to admit that Manhattan had a bit of a history importance in this as well, but downtown Brooklyn was very important to this, and they were all right down there. Unfortunately, another thing that happened was a developer got a hold of the property through deed fraud, and they applied for a demolition permit. So at that point, we were, we nearly gave up at that point. We really thought that the building was going to be gone, and it could have been demolished at any day. Actually, just a few months ago, a very similar thing happened. An owner had a beautiful historic building, and they just destroyed it overnight. And there's nothing anybody could do about that. So for like 2 years, we were on edge because the building could be demolished. So we had this big fight. Here's a picture of one of our many, many protests. And there behind us is 227 Duffield. You can see that the windows are open there. So this is when the developer who wanted to demolish it had it, but so we fought to get a landmark protection. New York City has a very strong landmark law. Once a building is landmarked, you can't legally demolish it, or it's extremely rare to demolish it. So we had 17,000 signatures. We had hundreds of organizations who signed our petition, and we won. And I have to include this because this is February 2nd, 2021. And for us to have our banner in New York City Hall, like this picture, was shocking. You know, we've always been these radical protesters, but here we finally got recognition. And so this is how Mayor de Blasio celebrated his last Black History Month, was by announcing that our building, our 227 Duffield, 227 Abolitionists, was saved. So we won, right? But then, and ironically, after the city tried to demolish it by eminent domain, the city buys the building to save it this time. But they sit on it, and it starts to deteriorate. There's these huge holes in the building. We have this one door. I hope I have a picture. Yeah. So here's this door to freedom, an original door that likely people liberated themselves by going through the door. New York City lost this door. It got destroyed because they were fixing up the building, but they destroyed this door to freedom. It even has, if you can see it on the sign, there's a there's a little sign that says "save" on it. That didn't save this door. We told them many times that it was there. They lost it. So now they are finally restoring the building, but this park that they wanted to do is going up right around it, and it's very likely that this park will open up in the next couple months, and they probably will not mention the 19th century abolitionist movement in this. So they promised, they have a contract for $1 million to do that. It looks like they will not do that. So this park surrounds 227 Abolitionist Place, and they're still ignoring the history. And one other way, we'll talk about this more later. So we have something in New York City called participatory budgeting. Each city council district gets $1 million to spend on local projects. We put our idea on the map, and so it was by far the most popular idea in the city council district. And just the other day, we found out, actually even since I wrote this, we found out that our idea was not on the map. They put 10 other ideas, but not by far the most popular idea. So we could use some help in that. We'll probably talk about that. And I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Raul. I have just to kick off the Q&A session, I have a question for all the panelists here. It's incredible that you all worked so much to get the building landmarked and preserved and now being renovated. It's so resonant to Latimer House in so many ways. In the case of Latimer House, you know, the granddaughter Winifred worked with so many people in the community. They established the Save the Louis Latimer House Committee. They worked with officials. They even got donation from the developer to save and move the house. And then once the house is saved and being renovated, it's almost like there's a new struggle that begins, which is to imagine the future of this place and almost to build an organization and to reimagine how this place can engage with people and how it works with the public. So could you all talk more about that?
Shawnè, you want to start?
Well, can you just
sure.
tell me what exactly the question is?
It's our vision of how to engage with the community with this building, like knowing that this is the beginning of the second phase of the struggle, which is to rebuild the building and then to dedicate it and design it for community participation and benefit.
I think we need to make sure your voice is heard, that there's an interest in the house. I think we also need to, we need to be more inclusive with people and let them know that, put pressure on City Hall, let them know that there's people who are interested in making sure it is a heritage center, because with your help is how we survive, and that's how we've survived almost 18 years. It's been through the power of the people. So you think your voice is just one voice and it can't make a change? I beg to differ, because my mother was just one person with one voice, and she was very loud with that voice, and and it was all about just fairness and maintaining her dignity, her home, which was also the home where her business was. So I think everybody related to it because she brought a human side to it. She was a grandmother who was raising her 5 grandchildren, which are my niece and nephews. She had her own business, which was down below, and she was being evicted through eminent domain abuse, gentrification, which a lot of us are going through right now. So when she let people know her side and what was going on with her, and as well as the Truesdales, then people took to that because they could relate in one way or another. Everyone related through whatever it is she was going through from one dimension to the other. She also stated that this house did not belong to her, it belonged to the people. So whenever you pass by that house and you see it right there, and it is just broken down, whatever, this small house in between this monstrosity on this side and this big giant crappy hotel on the other side, you're going to see that little house that with the windows broken, everything. And guess what? That house is a symbol of the people. That house is the power of the people. That house represents the resilience that we have as a people. And it has no color on that. Yeah. It has human on that. It has respect on that. It has freedom on that. So it survived through so many things, and it's connected to powerful ancestors, my mother and the Truesdales and all the people who went through there. So I do not doubt that it's the ancestors that helped save that house. There's no doubt. Some people may say, yeah, yep, we hear you. No, I know within every fiber of my being that the ancestors who are a part of 227 Abolitionist Place were monumental in helping save that house. I've gotten too many dreams from my mother pushing me in the direction of where we are right now, to know that it was the help of the ancestors. It's the help of people's knowingness of spirituality that we can overcome even the most impossible of things. So I hope that kind of answers what you asked.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that we envision that it's going to be a cultural heritage center in which we are going to be sharing the history of not just that house, which is significant, but also of the entire area. That Brooklyn, downtown Brooklyn, was a hotbed of abolitionist activity, and that there were multiple institutions with people of multi-faith who were in multi-faith and multi-races who were engaged in that work. And I think that that's really the most important thing. Because when we erase the history, then we lose out. All of us lose out, right? So by reminding us of the history of having events and activities and programs that are going to be taking place in that Cultural Heritage Center, we believe that we'll be able to do something that's kind of rare, which is to marry both the interests of the community in learning more about their own history on the ground that they are now living on, right, walking on a daily basis, with the commercial interest, because we do believe that the site as a cultural heritage center will also be a place of interest to others that are coming to Brooklyn, right? Because Barclays is not that far down the street. There's a mall literally across the street. There are 3 hotels on the block. So those folks will also very likely want to come across the street and learn a little bit more about that. And so we believe that this is one of those rare occasions, if the city will allow us to do it. Like, just like they couldn't imagine, they didn't have the imagination to understand how preserving that area could have made a major difference to the city of New York in a positive way. We also, and then they went against this poor Black woman, against all of those folks, and only this one Black woman would stand up. She was the only one who ended up saving her house, even though the big powers that be in the eminent domain fought against, and she won. But it's also something that the whole community was able to save, because we wouldn't have been able to do it without community support. So the community is going to be engaged. We are going to be engaging with them about identifying what the programs will be, but we're really clear that we want to write something and have some written materials. We want to invite the young children of the area to come down to the house and way down to that area and see what it looked like in that basement below the basement, where people, human beings, you know, came to try and get their lives saved. And it connects us with history. It makes that history so much more real for them. And so that's, if you could have seen some of the faces of the children that have come to support us saving that house, the delight in their faces when they hear this was a stop on the Underground Railroad, something that they read about in school was actually something in their neighborhood, that is something that you cannot replace with money.
Exactly. And that connection to history and, like Shawné said, to the ancestors, you don't get that in the hotel building. You get that through places like the Abolitionist Place and the Lewis Latimer House. This is why we preserve them.
That's right.
Someone asked.
Can I just pick up on,
yeah, go ahead.
One thread in the comments, and Clement mentioned this, and Gwendolyn is mentioning it, is that we, as people in New York and in the North more generally, tend to look south when we want to talk about oppression. And one of the things that we are very careful to talk about, and we are very deliberate in talking about, is that there were people complicit in slavery in New York. The financial institutions that provided the financing for and the capital for the institution of slavery were based here in New York, continue to be based here in New York in many cases. And so we're in solidarity with the struggle in Texas and Florida right now, where they are coming for this history in a much more significant, aggressive, and and headlong way. But it's happening here too, because we bury this history in New York. And one of the things we want to do is make sure that the children of New York don't go to school, can't show up at school for 12 years and not hear these stories. And till now, they've been able to do that.
Yeah, and I want to also say that those struggles are connected with the struggle that we're dealing with now. Like, all of this was part of a gentrification that had to do with, people with money trying to determine what everything should be and force people out who didn't have money. And, it's connected to the same battle that people were having on the border, where their children were being taken away from them. It's connected to the struggles that people have suffered here, where, they have wage theft going on. Like, all of these struggles are related, and we all need to work together to be united against oppression, because that's the only way that we win.
Yes, well said. Shana asked, how can we get the project back on the ballot?
I'm gonna let Raul answer that question.
Hopefully we just, actually I'm gonna tag team with Olayinka. We put it up on our website. Is it up yet?
Yeah, it's there.
So maybe we'll put the link. Hold on, we'll find the link. So yeah, I'm not at all surprised it didn't get on the participatory budgeting map. This is supposed to be a very transparent, democratic process. A staff member for the city council member asked my kids and I not to attend a public meeting about this. And when we did go anyway to discuss it, the participatory budgeting in the city council district is framed as climate justice. And I was like, well, social justice is climate justice. And I was like, oh, is anybody going to buy that argument? I went there and everybody was like, yeah. This neighborhood was completely transformed. It used to be a poor, a largely African-American and immigrant community. And with the rezoning of 2004 was completely transformed into now 93-story buildings are going up there. So these are not like, little 20-story buildings. These are huge buildings that were put up with very specific agenda in mind. And part of that agenda was erasing the history of this neighborhood. And people who remember this know this very viscerally. It's a very powerful thing. So for them the connection between zoning and their history, the connection between climate justice and social justice is a visceral thing, but it was not framed that way. So, in Florida, everybody knows DeSantis very clearly like, oh, we're gonna not have the African-American AP courses and do all these other weird things. We don't do it like that in New York. Instead we have a discussion, we'll talk about something, and somehow this history is never prioritized. So I don't know what we're going to do, but I think, this just was the other day. It's a bit of a gut punch, but hopefully we're going to ask people to contact the council member's office, because it's really ridiculous that it didn't get on. So hopefully also the participatory budgeting, this is a national movement. I think if they hear what's going on, they will be aghast that the popular will, the participatory part of this budgeting was ignored and disdained by dismissing the most popular idea, and really most very appropriate in every way. This should be there, and I think hopefully also the national participatory budgeting and the citywide participatory budgeting effort will have something to say about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Raul said, this is really fresh. Like, this just happened, and Lincoln Resper, has been alongside us. He's marched alongside us. In some of the photos, you can see him there holding up signs. And so it's really disconcerting to see that he's being silent about this, like the disrespect, the inappropriateness to ask someone, a constituent and his family, to not show up to a public event. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. So thank you, Shawnè, for asking how you can help. It's on the website. The link is in the chat there. Just, if you have the time, contact him and let him know how you feel. And we'll probably have some more updates as we move forward.
Olayenka, can you tell them which part within the website they need to click on? Because there's a couple of tabs.
Yeah, so it's actually a pop-up. So when you go to the website, maybe like wait 3 seconds and it'll pop up. So it's a link that will take you to a Google Doc that has more information, and then the council members' contact information. So you can email him or call, whichever you choose.
Yeah, and I just want to say also that there is, as Raul pointed out, there's also a park nearby that they're building, and we have, that proposal that was made to really commemorate the contribution of those Black women fighting for the right to vote and other of our rights, has been kind of like twisted into some other abstract event where those faces and those women's bodies are not going to be commemorated in statues there. And I just like to say at this time, like as Raul pointed out, we have almost all of the streets of Brooklyn that have been named for people who were engaged in acts of slavery. Not all of the people, but I'm saying a large number of the original names of streets in Brooklyn are attributed to people who had been slavers. And yet, when we just want, when at a time when people are knocking down those kind of statues to that sort of oppression, when we're proposing something positive, that we create statues in honor of women who fought for freedom, why is it that that is something that is just incomprehensible for people? I just don't understand why the city would fight against something like that. I haven't heard anybody who I've spoken to who's not an elected official say anything bad about the idea of having those women commemorated. But when it comes down to making those decisions, the business district has decided that they want it to be something else that doesn't talk about the history. And I think that that's a mistake on their part as well.
And speaking of working with different city agencies in the process of preserving and renovating and maintaining a historic site like this, the Latimer House is owned by the city, by the Parks Department, which is different agency than NYCDC. But like, what have your experience been? This might be get into the technical details in like making sure like things like losing that door doesn't happen again. How have you been like trying, or like what kind of challenges have you experienced in like making sure the city fulfill its duties?
It's really kind of nuts. We have the local community board seems very uninterested. Like everybody, even I would say even the Economic Development Corporation would be more in favor of what we're doing than the city council member. It's just so strange. So this property is owned by somebody asked about the New York City Economic Development Corporation. This is one of the public authorities founded basically by Robert Moses, so that there's no public oversight. So it's really a very, very opaque system. Yeah, it's really a struggle. But the crazy thing is, like, so we got protected by the Landmarks Preservation Commission, which is also supposed to not be. They're not supposed to care about the owners, saying it's supposed to be only judge the historical importance. But it was basically because Mayor de Blasio and his wife, and I got to give credit for Lincoln Ressler, probably helped push the Landmarks Preservation Commission to save the property. So there's the official process, and then there's just the political will. So this is why we're really happy to have everybody here tonight, because we always need more political will. I mean, we have these surges of activism, and then it gets tiring after a while. So we always need the fresh blood all the time. A lot of people know about this and care about this, but it goes really longer than 20 years. I mean, this is a battle that's been going on for centuries, really. So having everybody here support us and stay in touch, we definitely want to connect our struggles. I think that's probably a really important way. I think maybe if I have one ask tonight is that we all just work together even more than we think we have. Yeah.
I just want to say also that all of us are volunteers working on this initiative to try and make this into something that is going to be a blessing to everyone, right? And so any of the support that we receive goes directly toward our organizing efforts. It's not going in to pay anybody. It's going into our organizing efforts. And so just want to make that clear until the time that we're ready to do that. I think the other thing to be really clear about is that Olayinka and Raul and Shawné and Justin have been just amazing at making sure that we have to literally check the site now. We can't rely on the city to do the things that are necessary to just keep the building up. I personally feel like sometimes that maybe they want it not to survive, to say, oh, well, we tried, but now it's that, and then they can go ahead and do whatever they want. And just to bring the whole thing home, to tell you how much, racism and classism are interwoven in the process. They were going to put a parking lot there, literally pave paradise to put in a parking lot. So we need to make it clear that
underground parking lot.
An underground parking lot. So literally parking on our people's history, erasing the history for something that has, basically no value. So,
and even more recently, they wanted to have the dog run right next to 227 Duffield, this little park. They were going to have the dog run next to the house and directly over. So there was tunnels connecting all these buildings, and they were going to have the dog run directly on top of where the tunnels were that were connecting these buildings. So, and we had to fight for months to move this a dog run. So so we don't have DeSantis, but we have say, oh yeah, oh, we didn't think about that. We didn't think about having dog urine on the site of where people liberated themselves would be a problem. Like, oh.
Yeah. So that just, again, I think that's just reflective of, you can get the idea of just how much respect or lack thereof is evident in the way the city is interacting. And just so people know, like, institutions can operate in these ways regardless of the race of the person who's the figurehead and mayor, right? The institutions continue to operate the way they've been designed to operate, and it surely wasn't on behalf of us. You know, it wasn't on behalf of poor people in the city. It wasn't on behalf of working people in the city. It wasn't on people of color in the city. Those institutions continue.
And who would this dog park and underground parking lot supposedly serve? Are they supposed to serve people in the community? I guess that would probably also speak to like who have been displaced and who are in the community nowadays.
So that particular street and the streets right around it have almost all been replaced with rich rich white folks that live there. Not all of them, but a vast majority. Like it's very much a business district now, so there's like the expansion of business in that corridor, and then these hotels or these really posh townhouses, like the high rises, like Raul mentioned. I told you, I put in the chat that I remember when one went up just a few years ago. They were advertising the studio for starting at $800,000. So that's not going to be for us working folks. So that's who's there now. So I guess that's the people who wanted the dog run, I imagine. But around that area, still you have people of color, working folks who weren't, thankfully, the last few who weren't all displaced. And they still use that as their primary place to go to hang out, to go shopping. There's food, there's furniture stores, there's like a whole bunch of other stuff, and there's like a history of hanging out downtown, and so you do get a mix of people. So those folks are the ones that have been very much engaged in supporting us in this, and surprisingly enough, even a lot of the people that are now occupying some of those high rises are very supportive as well, because they find it fascinating, the history, and they find it interesting. So it's not like, I think there's an assumption that, only poor people or Black people or working people would be interested in maintaining this, but it's not the case. Even the hotels have said that they think that it would be a good idea. So that's why I said it's rare that you get organizing where you have a win-win, where the commercial interests and the people's interests come together. And this is one of those cases. And yet, who's the person messing it up? The city.
It's so strange because you can tell, like, there could be a tourist many times. Like, there's some tourists walking down the street and you explain, and in seconds they're like, oh yeah, of course. People get it. They don't even they may not even never been to New York City before, and they get it very quickly. It's only these policy makers, who don't seem to understand. It's very strange.
Yeah, and Brooklyn is one of those places that's really, a portion of New York City that's a really international impact, but certainly national, because, so many people who live in other parts of the country have people in their family who have spent time in Brooklyn, right? Who lived in Brooklyn for a certain period of time, right? And so those folks are also interested in it. Like, those folks are also want to hear more about the history, because the history is their history as well. And so, no matter what your race, what your history is, this is a history that is part of the United States history. It's part of our world's history. It's certainly part of an international history, because when we talk about how people got here and under what circumstances. And so I just find it really sad that we live in a time in which history in and of itself is being attacked. The idea of learning history is being attacked.
Just the idea that the majority of people in this country don't even realize that New York was the second largest slave owning state in the nation.
Yeah.
That's shocking to me because I know it, but it's so shocking when people learn, well, that New York's in the North. They didn't have slavery in the North. Wall Street, Black Friday wasn't called Black Friday for sales. For sales of Black bodies. Yeah. Right down on Wall Street.
Yeah. And people
and for people who don't know, just some context, Wall Street was built by enslaved people. That wall of Wall Street was built by enslaved people. So it's so integral to New York City history.
I mean, the building of the wealth of New York City, and then now they're telling us that, because of that, they don't have enough money to commemorate our ancestors. That's really sad. And to be really clear, not just the Black people who were enslaved, but the people who fought for them to be free, the people who risked their lives and their livelihoods in order to help them be free. Though that is also part of the story that has to be remembered, that people saw unjust laws and they saw human rights abuses and they stepped up and said, I'm going to do something about it. That is part of the history that we should be embracing, that people were able to see right and wrong and work for it, regardless of the color of the skin of those who were being oppressed. And that's important. That's an important part of New York City history. So I just feel like that's also something that we can be proud of.
Thank you for that. And just again, yes, for New York City, all these different sites, they are all an integral of the city's history. And we're like Latimer has, like Abolitionist, we're not like isolated site from where we are. I've been like getting goosebumps just seeing in the video the image of the basement, the hall, the door. And thinking about how Louis Latimer's parents escaped and how Louis Latimer stayed in downtown Brooklyn for a period when he moved here. It's all the dots are connected. So I wanted to ask you all, like, have you been like making some interesting connections from Abolitionist Place to like other parts of New York City and other local histories?
Sorry, we got to talk about the Flatbush African Burial Ground.
Oh yeah, go on, Olenka. That's great. You're muted, sweetheart.
Sorry about that. Yeah, there's some really, I feel like right now we're in this moment, and because it's taken such a long time for us to get here, it seems like, we're like that seed that's like germinating, and then, we're like sprouting now, because a lot of us are having conversations. Recently, Roxy, we saw you at the Northern Slavery Conference, which was up in Yonkers, which was amazing. We got to sit and spend time with so many other institutions, museums, other cultural spaces, all having this conversation. And the keynote was about, we're all in this together. So I just, again, want to thank you all, Rand and Roxy, for inviting us and having this talk series, just giving us the opportunity to come together and just use our collective power, to uplift each other's work. And so, with that, during the pandemic, I think 2020, I learned about the Flatbush African Burial Ground. It's on the corner of Church Avenue and Bedford in the heart of Flatbush. It's been there since like the 1600s. That's where, the enslaved folks, buried their dead. And unfortunately, over time, it became a place that wasn't honored. They built a school on top of it. They built another school on top of it. Some of the remains were actually dug up and like reinterred at the, oh my gosh, I'm blanking.
Greenwood Cemetery?
No. Oh my gosh, the church on Church Avenue. The Reformed Church. Oh my gosh.
The Dutch Reformed Church.
Oh, thank you. The Dutch Reformed Church. So this like pattern of, dishonor and just disrespect to our ancestors, is continuing with the return to like their enslavers. And our mayor and the council member at the time had proposed putting affordable housing on this land. Of course, we were not okay with that, and a coalition formed, and we were able to stop that. And now there's money in the budget. There's, we're making some strides there. But there's also a movement at the Lefferts House. The Lefferts House Museum is relaunching this amazing project, Reimagine Lefferts. Dylan Yates there is an incredible human being who really has the heart to link all of our work, and so that we can tell this thread of, our resistance and our resilience, and the fact that, Brooklyn, this place that we're all drawn to, everyone wants, Brooklyn, a part of Brooklyn, we could leave and some of us still call ourselves Brooklynites. There's something about this place. And I believe it is that, that DNA of putting our lives on the line for people, regardless of who they are or where they come from or anything, and I just think that story, that history is so important for us moving forward, because slavery never ended. It changed forms, it's morphed and transformed into something different. It exists across all, unfortunately it exists across a lot of different sectors of our society.
The narrative persisted.
Yeah, definitely. And so, yeah, we're just really grateful to be able to have like this, this slice of Brooklyn life to be able to uplift. And thank you again for inviting us here to talk about this work.
I'd like to say, I don't know, I guess I'm the ancestor person, but I think it's important to note that the majority of buildings, like Raul mentioned, were built by enslaved Africans, and they were phenomenal in what they did. And one thing I love that I see every single day when I go through any neighborhood, anywhere, is the symbols that our ancestors chose to leave us when you pass by a home that has gates. Now, on the gates, so many people don't realize this, on the gates of any home that you see, they have Adinkra symbols on it. Those Adinkra symbols mean certain things. So when you pass by a gate that has the two symbols going like that, that's a symbol of hope. Hope. This is what our ancestors were leaving. Just like the pyramids is a symbol and messages within the pyramids, same with the gates. There you got the symbol of hope. You have the symbol of Sankofa, which means make sure you go back to your past in order to move forward to your future. That's a different symbol with the two little curly cues that go down and around. That represents Sankofa. So, which means go back to your past to remember and go forward onto your future. So they're constantly talking to us. So please be mindful. Be mindful when you're in a neighborhood and you pass by a gate and see one of those symbols and know that our ancestors are speaking to us to remember to keep hope. Remember to go back to your past. Remember to stay humble. Symbols that we pass by every day and don't even realize.
I want to leave some time for our audience to ask questions. You can either use the Q&A function or leave your questions in the chat. And when I opened the website, I somehow, maybe it's my browser, the pop-up didn't come up for me. Is there a direct link we can share?
Yeah, I tried to fix it. Is there a banner bar at the top? There should be a black banner bar.
I just saw it. I saw the banner at the top.
Okay. Yeah, maybe it's because I was still in it. Let me try to exit out and come back in. I was editing.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the link. Does any of the other panelists have anything to share? I do have another question. Are there any lesser known aspects of your site's history that you feel you could illuminate?
There's so much history. I put together, I mentioned that like 200 years of history. So right near this 227 Abolitionist Place is Bridge Street Church, which is the oldest Black church in Brooklyn, about 220 years old, depends how you count. But, this is where Frederick Douglass would go to speak. Susan B. Anthony would speak there. So, I mean, there's so many stories of that. Or to go back to the beginning here. So some of these original African-American families actually had close ties to the Shawnè and Montauk Indians as well. So, I mean, and they were very aware of it back then too. So, I mean, there's been so much, intersectionality, if you want, and also petty fights too, especially among, I would say, the white abolitionists. You had the Garrisonians who hated religion, and and then the Tappins, Lewis Tappan, they started competing abolitionist organizations, but the African American community was like, okay, well, let's just save everybody. Like they didn't quite really care so much about, like, okay, are you going to be pro-church or anti-church? It's like, okay, let's just save people. So the oral histories, yeah. So, Shawnè, do you want to talk about the oral histories?
Well, I if you don't mind, I'd like to talk a little bit about the abolitionists who lived there. So Harriet Lee, we need to mention Harriet Lee and Thomas Truesdell owned the house from 1851 to 1863, at a time when Duffield Street was a hotbed of local abolitionist activity and women's suffrage. The Truesdell and their neighbors played a significant role in national anti-slavery activism. Their home was situated among the epicenter of Brooklyn's local movement to support the liberation of formerly enslaved people, centering on the churches on Duffield Street, including Bridge Street AME, Concord Baptist Church, and Plymouth Church. Harriet Lee served on the organizing committee of the Anti-Slavery Convention of American Women that convened in Philadelphia in 1838. She was also the treasurer of the Providence Ladies Anti-Slavery Society. Thomas Truesdell was a founding member of the Rhode Island Anti-Slavery Society and a colleague of Lewis Tappan. The Truesdells were friends with William Lloyd Garrison. The couple attended the annual meeting of the American Anti-Slavery Society in New York in 1840. When the abolitionists split, Garrison stayed with the couple in Brooklyn after the meeting ended before he left for the World's Anti-Slavery Convention in London. So there was also a letter that William Lloyd Garrison wrote to his wife before he went to the anti-slavery convention in London. And in this letter, he mentions staying at the Truesdale's home. So that was like, yeah, that's my mama's house. You know, so it's just so, and I have to throw, you know, my mom's history in there because she just really, she went through so much. She went through so much from getting her phone bugged to having rifles pointed in her face, her home being ransacked, and with that, her reputation being tarnished. I mean, they just flooding the home from the bottom where the tunnels were, and then also above in the ceiling, which also attributed to her getting interstitial pneumonia, which is the hardening of the lungs to where it loses its elasticity to where she could no longer breathe on her own, and that is how she passed away. So scrubbing mold off of her walls, I mean, just so she could stay there, which we all tried to convince her not to, but she was determined. And it was the detriment of her health. The house killed her. I don't want to say the house killed her, but the elements that got within the house from the outside people killed it.
And the refusal of the city to provide adequate support to this woman as the construction of these high rises was going on. So she reported multiple times that she needed help because when they were digging low, it was opening up sources of water underground, but she didn't get any help.
So remember, this is a grandmother here. Remember, and she spent hours making sure that the pump was working to pump out the water from out of her basement. And then on top of that, fighting people who were predatory lenders or trying to steal the deed from the house in court, which she also defeated that. And then trying to take care of her grandchildren, which caused mental illness because of everything that's going on. And her fighting and making sure she brings the children with them. So you have all this, and she's still not backing down to save this home that she feels represents the people. So my mother went through a lot. My mother gave up a lot. My mother gave up herself. My mother gave her life. She fought hard. So there is no way that I am going to mention the Truesdales and not mention the main person who brought the Truesdales back to life. And I will forever, as long as I have breath, let people know the contributions that my mom has given. She gave her life so that this house can be a representation of the resilience of the people against enslavement, no matter what form. No matter what form. She did not back down. She was a victim of gentrification. She was a victim of character assassination. She was a victim. She was harassed. She was terrorized. I don't know how I would handle a rifle being pointed in my face. She doesn't know what they would have did to her if her youngest grandson was not in the back seat and she made that be known. And then after they saw him in the back seat, okay, rifles away. Who could live through something like that? And she suffered mentally after that. The couple of years before her passing, she suffered, and Raul was there with us. it took a toll. It took a toll. So this little bit of fighting we're doing, I don't have no problem, because she's been through I don't know, worse. So I'll do what I need to do to get the word out. And it's a story that needs to be known. It's a story that's phenomenal with so many layers to it. So many. I mean, it would be a phenomenal movie because there's just so many. You got politicians, you've got bribery, you've got, oh my gosh.
Lying to city council.
It was, yeah, the city hiring an organization, AKRF, $500,000 to disprove my mother's testimonies and what she found out and what she researched with the help of a gentleman by the name of Jim Driscoll in regards to the history of the house. And then
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's a Jim Driscoll, the Jim Driscoll from Queens?
Queens, yes.
Oh, he is on our board, actually.
Oh, I didn't know that. Say hello. I tried to call him every now and then, and I can't get through.
Yeah, so that's a really good connection there.
We tell Jim that we love him and he could call us. My number is still the same. Yes.
I will.
He was in the trenches. Let me tell you.
And he visited Mama Joy more than anybody else. Like when she was like in a nursing home, in the hospital, he was there all the time. And not only knowing the history, but like on so many levels.
Even when he was not well. So this you have to understand the depth of this house. You know, it's really intense and beautiful and sad and makes you angry and happy and rejoice at the same time.
So somebody was asking about the oral history. So when was I forget this part of the timeline? When was your mom's her husband bought it in like the 50s or something?
No. Her husband was married to please forgive me for not remembering her name, but he married into the house. So his late wife, before my mom, her family owned the house. And before her family owned the house, the Truesdales owned the house. So she passed away and the house was left to her husband.
And what year was that?
That, I don't know when she passed away. She passed away, I'm not sure. I want to say in the 70s. And then her husband, Albert Chatel, kept the house. When my mom came to the house, because the house first it was a wig shop. When the first wife was, what is her name? I'm sorry, it's just blanking me. But after she passed away, it was turned into a hair salon. My mother.
The hair salon was after she passed away?
After the first wife passed away. Yes. So Albert ran the hair salon and my mother worked there and then became manager. And then he asked her to take over. Now they later got married. In his will, he willed the house to my mom. But during the time of their marriage, he would always talk about how his first wife's family spoke about the Truesdales, the abolitionists who lived there, and the people, who came through the tunnels and how they connected. And not only that, there's a lot of elders in the Fort Greene community and other places who lived around the area who it was just common knowledge. So the oral history was being told to my mom. it was being told to my mom, as you saw in the video of her, and how people would come up, you know, saying, well, this is sacred ground. And there was a bookstore right next to my mom's home called A&B Bookstores.
Mm-hmm.
Now that was a primary Black-owned bookstore that sold Black books. And they were major distributors all throughout the country. They also was their home, their building was also part of the Underground Railroad. They were pushed out. They were pushed out. My mom's home was not the only one that was left after she won eminent domain. She fought and she saved her home and the 6 other homes that were on the block. But they chose to sell to developers. So after they chose to sell to developers, of course, the homes were torn down. But A&B bookstores, they did not, they were pushed out. They were threatened out.
Just to be clear, so people will understand, the tunnels were connecting the houses underground so that in the event, so first of all, to move people safely without them being seen, but also because if you had law enforcement, like say they got a lead, they thought there were people here, then you could have them underground, you could move them to another house and nobody would be there when they came to see. And so this was a real, this was something that was deliberate and designed to do so. It was built in the year of the Fugitive Slave Act. So because people understood then that the law was designed at that point to support the people who owned other people, right? And so if you were caught harboring a person who had been enslaved, then you would yourself be putting yourself in jeopardy. Like a lot of those people have been tarred and feathered, right? They were beaten, they were lynched, their buildings were burnt down. So they were targeted. And so this is why they went about doing this in the way that was going to be safer for people to be moved. And that's important to know, that those people who stood with those who had been enslaved were putting their lives and their livelihoods on the line.
So one of the arguments was, well, where is the documentation? Hello.
Right, you don't want documentation.
That's why you have the oral history. Any documentation meant your life.
Right.
That was
like that episode. Remember that episode of The Wire where he said, "Are you taking notes on a criminal conspiracy?" Like, it's the same thing. It's people were working diligently outside of the view of the authorities to do something that was literally a conspiracy against the federal government, which was very concerned with preserving the rights of Southern slave owners. Right. And you have the situation where, and I think this is one of the most powerful things in the story, is people with wealth and privilege most of the time sided with those slave owners, but some of them did not. And they were right here in central Brooklyn, and they were here, and they took great personal risk, and they worked across race and class lines to dismantle an unjust system. They didn't do it all the way, because we still got vestiges of it today. But it is one of the only examples in American history where you see this level of radical solidarity against an unjust system. And I think that that's the kind of thing we want to preserve in the Heritage Center, so that kids can come here and see, whatever the color of their skin, wherever they're from, that there is a role for them to play in dismantling unjust systems.
That's right.
And they need to know that their ancestors, some of them, played a role on the right side of history.
Yes. Yeah. And
there's
I feel like
always a choice.
Right. And it has implications today, because we know that there are laws that are being passed, maybe even as we speak right now, that are being designed to further oppression, right? To deny people their history, to deny people the right to work, right? To deny people access to education, to deny people access to healthcare based on where they were born. Like, these are intrinsic things that are part of being a human being. And so those who engage in supporting those folks, you know, they are extending themselves in part of an ongoing history and tradition of that being the case. And that is something that we need to remind people of. And we need to encourage and inspire, because that's what makes the difference in the face of injustice. When people are silent, or they turn and look the other way, or they pretend they don't know, that's how injustice can flourish. And so we just have to remind people of, that's why it's important for us to lift these stories up, because that's what gives us the power and the energy. That's what our ancestors are telling us to do the right thing, right? These are the things that, the messages that we should be taking away.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this enlightening conversation. We are just past 8 p.m. I wanted to thank you all so much for your amazing work, volunteering to preserve this incredible history and this incredible site. And thank you all for members of the audience for joining. Roxy, would you like to share some information about our next event in the series?
Yeah, thank you all for tuning in. I'll keep this short. We have, the series is going to happen. We have speakers lined up. We have Dr. Anne-Marie Weathers from the Shabbat Center that will be speaking next month on the 4th Thursday as well, from 6:30 to 7:30. So we hope, if you enjoyed tonight's program, to join us again next month. And I have left the links to the Friends of Abolitionist Place website and their petition in the chat. So make sure to, sign, help to support to bring them back onto the participatory budgeting ballot. And also, if you want to check out next month's talk, there are more details on our website. With all that said, if you didn't catch it in the chat, we'll also send it out. This talk is being recorded as well. So, help us share it with your friends and family. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
So much. One more. Gotta give it up one more time
please.
for the Lewis Latimer House, Roxy.
Yes. Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lewis
Amazing.
Latimer House.
Amazing,
Thank you,
amazing.
Rangan. Thank you so much for inviting us. We really enjoyed it.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Please all go support the Abolitionist Place. Click on the link. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night.